In this video, I'll be showing you how to edit Firefly photos. Of course, the first step is always going to be to take the photos. Capturing fireflies is basically the same as capturing star-lapse or just astrophotography. Basically, you want to go into manual settings, set your camera into live view, zoom in as much as you can. For me, that's times 10. And then manually focus on something in the frame. Either it can be a firefly or usually something else in the frame, such as a tree or maybe a background or something interesting. Maybe there's a waterfall or something, that'd be great. The reason I do this instead of focusing on the firefly itself, if I can help it, is because the fireflies are going to move. They're going to be blurry anyway. So there should at least be something in focus in your frame to make a good photo. The settings I generally use is about 30 seconds. The ISO is going to depend on your location as well as your camera. I'm using a pretty old APS-C camera. So I usually have to go up to about 800 ISO, and of course I have the widest aperture possible. For me, I think I was using a Rokinon lens which had a 2.8 f-stop. Yeah, usually around 800 ISO for me, although in some situations I could do 100 ISO and in darker situations 3200 ISO. So I'm fortunate enough to have several types of fireflies in my location. So as you can see from this photo, I was able to shoot at 30-second exposure at 100 ISO. And again, this was about 10 photos stacked, so it's about 5 minutes of exposure time total. And the reason I can use 100 ISO in this one is because it's actually inside the city. You can see there's light coming from buildings, there's light coming from street lights. It's actually a very bright scene, but the fireflies still come out. That's what I really like these Genji Botaru, is that the way that they fly, they leave these nice streaks. Now, if we look at the Hime Botaru, they're completely different. They have these like kind of bokeh ball, just blinking on and off lights. The Hime Botaru means Princess Firefly in Japanese. And they're one of the more or less 3 types of firefly in this area. Of course, there's apparently thousands of types of fireflies across the world, so you can get many different styles of photos. This photo I took was in a very dark glen, so you can mostly just see the fireflies. It's not that great. And it was a 30-second at 800 ISO. So the first thing that I did is I set up a time-lapse using an intervalometer of 30-second intervals, and I let it run for about 5-10 minutes. And that yielded 10 photos that I'm going to use to edit. So first go through your edits and find something you're happy with. Basically, I'll just open the exposure a bit, raise the shadows and drop the highlights. So now I have exposed my photo. You can see the settings on the right here. Of course, it's going to be different based on your photo, but this is basically just what I did. Now I am going to select the photo and select 10 additional photos. And I'm going to stack these together. So I have my 10 photos selected and I'm going to go to synchronize, make sure everything is the same. And you have everything selected, and except after it's finished processing, while you have these 10 selected, I'm going to right click, edit in, and open as layers in Photoshop. Now this might take a while depending on how many photos you're stacking. 5 or 10, not going to take too much time. But if you say doing 100 or 20 or 50, it's going to take a long time depending on your machine. Alright, so we've loaded as layers into Photoshop, and now you can see on the side here we have our 10 layers. I'm going to select 9 of these layers, and you can see the different effects by the different types of stacking. But the effect that we want is lighten. So you just select lighting, and that's basically it. Now what this does is it takes the brightest parts of the photo and it stacks them together. So now we have all the Genji Botaru flying together, and this really recreates the experience of seeing them in this small forest glen. It is really a beautiful moment, so I'm glad that I'm able to take this sort of photo and show other people. Now, from this point on, you can export straight from Photoshop. However, there's a few changes I want to make. Because the background was really bright, it kind of stands out. So I could change that in Lightroom. So what I want to do is I will close this photo and just select save, and that's all you need to do. It'll be back in Lightroom waiting for you. And now we have our TIFF file, which is basically a 10-minute exposure using 800 ISO. However, we are not overexposed in the trees, or a little bit in the back. So I think I'll probably just use this photo as it is, although generally when I do night photos, I try to make it a little bit more blue. I find that's just a bit more natural, it seems. So I think that that's more of the natural forest color. It was a little bit overly green before, and generally this sort of thing, I like to add a bit of a vignette, and that's going to really highlight the darkness in the forest and the brightness of the fireflies. It's still a bit bright in the background here, and I suppose I could add a gradiated filter to make that darker, but I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to export this as it is because I quite like it. This worked really easily because we had 10 photos that had the same sort of exposure throughout them. But that's not always the case. Now, because the Genji Botaru fireflies were much brighter than these Hime Botaru, I could expose at around 800 or 100 ISO depending on how bright my situation was. Now, for the Himebotoru, they're a lot shyer and they only live in these deep, dark forests. And this was a night with no moon, so it was really dark. So as you can see from my settings here, I have a 30-second exposure with 3200 ISO. The background is completely gone. It wasn't exposed for, and it's impossible to recover it for me. So what I'm going to do is I took the same sort of 10-minute time lapse, just getting the fireflies, and then I took one photo where I illuminated the scene briefly, trying not to disturb the fireflies as much as I could, and I focused on this bamboo. Now this will serve as the background, but we're going to have to put it on the bottom layer in Photoshop. So again, I have already exposed these 10 photos. I'm going to select them and open them as layers in Photoshop. So we have loaded these files in Photoshop. I'm just going to put this layer on the second layer to show you the difference. You can see the scene is completely dark. And what we're going to do is just take our brightest photo and serve as the background. So I'm going to drag it to the bottom, have everything selected except the bottom file again, and the same process, just set to lighten. And there you have it. So this is kind of the difference you can see between those two fireflies. These ones are just like Christmas lights blinking on and off, and it's really amazing actually. If you'd like to see a video of my little adventure where I went around capturing these photos around Japan, I'll leave a description as well as a link in the video, which should be popping up at the top right about now. And you can actually go through these photos, and when you're happy with them, and you can select different layers and you can turn them off if you think it's too much to kind of get the effect you want. I'm pretty happy with this because there was just thousands of fireflies in this small little bamboo grove. And if you want to maybe change the opacity, you can do that as well. I think that adds a bit of depth to it, kind of like if everything's a bit different in their light, and makes it seem a bit more realistic. But you can see they were kind of just hiding in this bamboo grove and kind of flying through this little path. It was a really magical moment, so that's what I really like about fireflies. They're just kind of a magical creature. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to subscribe. And let me know how I did or what you'd be interested in seeing in the future in the comment section below. It's right next to the like button. Of course, I have started a Japan travel adventure channel, and one of the first videos is going to be how I found these fireflies and the places that I went to take photos of them. I'm going to be going around and trying to find some of the more secret places in Japan that you might not see in other channels, so if that sounds like your thing, can you head over there and subscribe to that as well? It's a new channel, so every new follow helps. That's it for me though. Until the next one, peace.